Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's PCMA webinar, Impossible Conversations, Navigating Challenges at Work and Home. Before we get started and I intro our speaker today, I do just want to ask a quick question. We're having a couple of technical difficulties on the back end here. So if you are in this meeting, if you could please drop where you're joining the meeting from in the Q&A, just so we can make sure our Q&A feature is working for today's webinar. And while you guys start popping questions into your location into the Q&A feature, I will go ahead and get us started here. Okay, so first of all, we are thrilled to welcome an outstanding speaker today who will guide us through the art of navigating high-stakes conversations, especially in those moments when trust is low, tensions are high, and resolution feels out of reach. So today, leading today's session is Greg Stevens, a best-selling author, keynote speaker, executive coach, and communication consultant. Greg is the author of Build New Bridges, The Art of Restoring Impossible Relationships. It's a powerful book that has helped people across the globe repair relationships that they once thought were beyond saving. With over 28 years of practical experience working with Fortune 500 companies and national organizations, Greg brings a wealth of insight into what it takes to restore trust, lead with empathy, and even in the most difficult moments. So joining Greg today is Noah. Noah might pop in, he might not pop in. We'll see, but if you do see another person come in, that's Noah. He's with Greg, the producer for Greg. So don't be alarmed if you see someone else come in. So just before we start, want to check back in to see if anybody has added anything to the Q&A. I'm worried they're not coming through. Okay, well, quickly before we dive in, we're going to go through just housekeeping notes really quick. So just as a reminder to everybody, this session is being recorded. The presentation slides are available right now, and they'll also be in the email that is sent following the meeting today, and will be sent when the recording is sent out as well. I'm going to pass the baton over to Greg so that he can go ahead and get us started. In the meantime, Greg, I'm going to work on trying to get this Q&A fixed, so I'm going to pop out really quick, but I'll pop back in as soon as we get it figured out here. So with that, welcoming Greg.
Thanks, Shannon. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can.
Okay, great. I'm Greg Stevens, and glad to be here. And I guess, Shannon, my slides should be showing now, correct? Okay, so we're here to talk about navigating these challenging work and home conversations. And as I said, Shannon, as Jordan was talking to me, I did write a book called Build New Bridges, The Art of Restoring Impossible Relationships. Everything I'm going to be talking about today, you can find some level of insight in the book, actually skill sets and how-tos. I wrote the book as kind of an autobiography, a communications guideline, and a how-to. It's all that rolled into one, and kind of put my heart into it and my last several years into it. But I'll share some stories about that as we go throughout today's session. I want to start out with a slide here. This picture right here is just really amazing when you think about it. This is on Mexico Beach, Florida, and this structure that withstood a hurricane. I want you to think about this. The place is called the Sand Palace. And look around it. When I first saw this, it looked like a bomb went off all around it. How did that structure stay so secure and everything else around it wiped out? Well, the person who built the structure actually decided they wanted to set it to handle any type of hurricane. And in October of 2018, Hurricane Michael came through. It was a Category 5 storm with 155 mile an hour winds and a storm surge of 14 feet. Now, the reason this structure stood was because it was prepared for it. It actually had the house is built atop 40-foot long precast, pre-stressed concrete piles driven 28 feet into the ground. It's concrete insulated walls. It's got an aerodynamic hip roof with steel panels, impact resistant windows and doors for 140-mile-an-hour winds. And even at the bottom floor, it had a sacrificial breakaway ground floor and reinforced structured connections throughout. Also, they made the structure to make sure they shortened the edges on the roof so it wouldn't have the lift of it, and it was built to sustain 240 to 250 mile an hour winds. Now, all the other homes were built to sustain 120 mile an hour winds. So I want you to get this person prepared, and this, even the collapsible bottom worked the way it was supposed to be. And I want you to think about this when you think about communication. Use it as an analogy. This thing had a stable foundation. They prepared in advance. It was not perfect, but it was effective through it. And they looked at it as solving the problems of wind, of storm surge, of all of that. And it had the ability, even with the breakaway bottom floor, to adapt to whatever happened. I want you to think about communication. Do we handle or prepare for our communication challenges ahead of time? Most of us are probably like the other structures around it, and that we do the bare minimum, or we do what we've always learned. And I can tell you this, what we've always learned isn't going to take us typically to where we want to go if we want to get there quickly and we want to build relationships as we do it. So my whole career has been working on how do I say the hard things the way I need to say them and build the relationship while I do it. And so for a stable foundation, we have to work on ourselves first. Most people, when they go into these difficult conversations, whether it's at work or at home, we tend to want to blame the other person. I wish that person would just change. But we have to begin with ourselves. We have to have a stable foundation. And this is a mantra I've lived my life by since about 2001. And it's this: everything in my life I create, promote, or allow. Want that to land for you for a minute. Everything in my life, I either created it, I promote it, or I continue to allow it to happen. So when I see this mantra actually allows me to take responsibility for every area of my life. When I don't take responsibility for my life, I give that responsibility to others and I acquiesce my power. I give it away to people who never asked for it and don't know how to use it. But to be able to hold on to my power, many times I need to have the skills to be able to do that. And I want to also suggest this at the very beginning of our talk today, is that you have no ability to change that other person. But if you change yourself, others may have to change how they engage with you. This is our real power. So I can't change the other person, but I can change myself. When I change how I do things, I can begin to influence the other person. I can't change them, but I can influence them. But if I don't change myself, I won't even be able to influence them. So what is an impossible relationship? Some of you experience this at work or at home. It's the belief that a topic cannot be discussed with someone we view as unreasonable. If we think that person is just too difficult, we will write them off, and we consider that to be an impossible relationship. Why try? It's not worth it. But there's 4 aspects that create us to think the relationship is impossible. The first is it is an inaccurate and limiting belief to think that the relationship is impossible to deal with. Also, it's based on a negative past experience, we've typically had an experience that didn't go well with this person. And so we carry that with us. In essence, we bring the baggage of that instance or instances with us every time we engage with that person. They're typically also defined by explosive emotions. And maybe the other person explodes, or maybe I do. When I say explodes, it could be me shutting down completely as well. I consider that an explosive emotion of silence. But it happened in the instance. And then what I've also found, what makes it impossible, is that both parties, the other person and you, lack the skill to have the conversation effectively. Now, most people will tell you, or managers or spouses or people in your life will say, you need to go have that conversation with this person. And you know you should do it. But most of us don't know how to do it. No, most of us have never sat through a class and learned the skills and then gone out and practiced them. I taught crucial conversations for years. Love the training, best communication training on the planet. But none of it works unless you go out and apply it. And that's what we'll be talking about. How do I go out and bridge that gap between what I know to do and how to do it? It's going to take practice. It's going to take falling on your face a couple of times. The real question is it worth it? And I can tell you over and over in my life, I found that it is worth it when I know how to do this. My confidence can begin to soar, and I can engage very differently with the people I'm speaking with. So, in impossible relationships, in today's social climate, there's a lot of taboo subjects. One of the things I really want to encourage you is when you understand how to communicate and have all the skill sets, a complete toolbox, I don't get scared of conversations because I understand what's going on underneath the battle at the top, and I know how to dig down. Does that mean my conversations always go well? Absolutely not. Sometimes I fall on my face. Sometimes others aren't willing to engage with me. But what I've found many times when we go into a conversation and it doesn't go well and we walk away, but we know we've done our best, there's a peace that we have when we walk away because we know there's nothing more we could have done. But so often I find the conversation doesn't go the way we hoped or we wanted it to go. But when we walk away, we feel like we haven't done our best. And there's something that eats at us. I should have said this. I should have done this a little differently. That is a part of self-mastery. We have to begin to master our own emotions as we do these conversations. And communication actually comes from two words: communion, common, and union. You put the two together, it's a communion. It is communication. And we battle. We don't have a common union. We have a decisive one. And we put walls up. And what we found in surveys that 90% of the people on this planet feel unsafe when they're talking to someone during a difficult time with someone who has more power than them. We just typically don't have a comfort to be able to do that. And so some of the more difficult topics we run into are politics, social issues, confronting bad behavior, giving performance feedback. Maybe what happens if we disagree with a boss? How do I disagree with my boss, or do I just follow everything they say and become a yes person? Or maybe sometimes we're scared to share concerns with a loved one. So these are some of the more difficult topics. But I had Jordan and Shannon send out a survey the other day, and I just wanted to bring up some of the more topics that we came up with when we saw this. And more common difficult conversations are when they're emotional or when people feel like they can't say no. Maybe you've got priorities that are at odds with each other, or you haven't set up agreements. It's so interesting. When we don't set up agreements up front, we actually live in an area of quicksand. Agreements help us have a strong footing. I want you to think about this. How many of you have agreements with your supervisor about how you'll talk about your differences? Do you have that in place? Do you have it with your spouse? Because as we look at these, or your significant others, if we don't have agreements, we're living in assumptions, and those assumptions are like quicksand. When something doesn't work, we want to begin to talk about it, but we don't have any agreements that we've laid out. What if I had agreements with my significant other about how we spent money, or what we were going to do on Saturday night, or maybe if we have kids, how we're going to discipline the kids, or what we're going to do for our next vacation? When you set agreements in place, you give yourself a solid ground to stand on. Maybe there's people in your organization who hijack meetings. They talk the entire time. Or you see a lack of accountability. We had some of those even in questions I'll talk about that were sent in. We see maybe leaders not holding others accountable. Or are we holding ourselves accountable? That's another conversation, isn't it? Are you holding yourself accountable to hold others accountable? That's a downward spiral, isn't it? Yeah, Jordan, was there something we needed? Do we have a question?
I just wanted to cut in really quickly, and I apologize, Greg.
No.
I am unable to figure out what's going on with the Q&A feature today. So if any of our attendees watching have any questions for Greg, feel free to email them over to me, Jordan, at askpcma.org. And they'll come in through my email, and we'll make sure that Greg addresses the questions before the end of the call today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it. All right. So maybe sometimes you feel pressure from your supervisor. You don't know how to talk about it. Or maybe the quality of work isn't what you want it to be. Maybe from your leaders or a direct report, whatever, or maybe even a coworker. Here's a continuation of this. Many times I find performance reviews are a crucial conversation. Maybe change management and training. Maybe the leaders who are missing in action, or the other side of the coin. Maybe you have leaders that are micromanaging, or you feel like you have to micromanage others. Maybe you're not good at delegating, or when you delegate things, you worry about those. You haven't set up agreements. Or maybe you find people pleasers, so you're not hearing the real objections that are going on that you need to move a project forward. Or maybe there's just a lack of the allocation of resources doesn't seem to be fair. Am I beginning to speak up in that? I want you to think that mantra I said earlier. Everything in my life I create, promote, or allow. When I start to look at these difficult conversations, what am I creating? What am I promoting? Or what am I allowing to continue? It's about being completely responsible. And I'm going to bring it back to family. Difficult family conversations. I see politics actually breaking the wall in families, or breaking down the whole unit and dividing families right now. In-laws, children, divorce, maybe dealing with your ex, maybe dealing with a significant other. You haven't set some of those boundaries. Neighbors, difficult neighbors you might have a conversation around. Maybe there's things you've been tolerating that you really wish you wouldn't tolerate anymore. Or maybe even understanding how to set your boundaries in a loving way or a professional, respectful way. And all of these are conversations. Most people say, you need to go have this, but no one's taught us how. And here's how we typically respond if we don't have the skill sets. We go to silence, or we sugarcoat our message. We are not clear. We're not straight shooters. Maybe we avoid the conflict, or we're trying to remain comfortable. Folks, people will take the easiest path possible, so we avoid the conflict thinking it'll probably solve itself. What I've typically found is that these conversations don't solve themselves. Something happens down the line where they get worse. Some of us attack or punish. And what I've also found in this area is if we don't have the power in the relationship, we typically go to the silent side or sugarcoat our message. If we have the power, we tend to attack and punish or try to control the person or the situation. There's just a dynamic there in human beings where we go to silence if we don't have power. If we do, we tend to use it. Once you get this one, this is a big one. Maybe we gossip about others or talk about them, not to their face, but behind their back. Or maybe we just completely sever the relationship and walk away. Now, some people ask me, Greg, is there a time to sever a relationship? Absolutely. If it's not healthy for you, but there's also a way, rather than cut it off, can I dismantle it? Can I effectively complete it in a way where it holds no power over me anymore? But what I typically find is when people sever or walk away from a relationship, they bring that baggage with them to the next relationship. Now, we typically think about this in a significant other. They bring their baggage with them. I'm going to say you bring it from work. Think about a boss you've had that didn't go well. Maybe you left that boss left, you stayed in place, or you went to another place. I'm going to suggest you bring that experience with you, because the moment you deal with another boss, you probably don't trust the new boss right away. Why is that? Is it because of the new boss? No, it's because of your old one, and you brought that baggage with you because you haven't dismantled or completed the relationship in an effective way. So, what if you had the skills to address these conversations effectively? And here's some of the keys to it. Instantly managing your emotions in the moment. You know how people can push your buttons? What if you learned how to actually manage your own emotions and people couldn't push your buttons anymore? It's a really fun thing to learn. Maybe delivering a tough message honestly and respectfully. One of the things I've learned, when we can say what we need to say and say it respectfully, people can begin to hear our message. But what we typically do, we deliver it with our emotion and we structure it incorrectly, and we don't get the result we want. And here's what happens. When a conversation becomes emotional, we tend to double down on logic. And emotion always trumps logic. Always trumps it. I don't care. You might have all the logic in the world, but if the person distrusts you or thinks you have a different motive, they will not hear or trust what you're saying, and your message falls flat. And is there a way I could have these skills to talk about these tough things and improve the relationships with my coworkers, with maybe some of the members? I know people. I'm a member of a country club as well. I know people. I know there are a lot of different personalities, and some of the people you work with are the nicest people, and some are just difficult, and you know you'll never be able to work with that person. I'm going to ask you to challenge your thinking about that, because they won't change unless you change. Now, if you change how you do things, they may have to change how they engage with you. But you don't have any power to change them. But if you change yourself, you can influence that other person possibly. And then what if you could learn to speak about almost anything with almost anyone? So what effect would it have on your life? So you can speak up, but you have to be ready, willing, and able. That means you've got to get prepared. Just like the Sand Palace. It didn't happen overnight. The structure had to be made. Investment had to be made, and time and effort to look at it. But was it worth it? Remember the shot of it? I would say it was, because they just had a couple of things to change, not an entire new house to build. So we want to look at improving not just our results, but our relationships. Typically, when we come into these conversations, we're just thinking about solving a problem. But I'm going to ask you, as you start to look at conversations, look at how can I solve the problem and build a better relationship with the person while I'm doing it. The two P's, the problem and the person. We typically go in working just on the problem. But if we just open our minds up to how can I do both, solve this problem and make a better relationship, that actually turns your brain on to begin looking for it to begin doing it. And just that one piece will help you. Now, this is the one skill I tell everyone when I'm doing something short like this. And this is the one skill I want you to take home that you can use today. Pause when a conversation gets difficult. When you feel your emotions, maybe your chest seizes up or you get a little too much adrenaline in your system. You just have that feeling inside. Pause. Take a deep breath and let it out. That starts to change your nervous system. The next thing we do, we have to ask ourselves a question, because when we go into fight or flight mode, that's what that emotion is doing to you. Your brain shifts because the adrenaline in your system, and you go from your logic center, the neocortex, to the fear center, the amygdala. And you can't help it. It is a reaction. You will always do it. But the question is, how quickly can I wake myself up to ask a question like, what is it I really want in this situation? Now, the first answer is usually the worst. I want to hurt that person because they hurt me. Stick with the question. But what I love about this, when we ask a question, we begin to reverse the process of the fight or flight routine. So taking a deep breath and then asking the question helps us to flip back, going from our amygdala to our neocortex, where our creative problem solving and thought process wake up. We can actually turn the brain back on by asking that question and get back to our best behavior. Once we're there, once we've answered what we really want, voice it, say it out loud, speak it. Don't just keep it inside. I need to say something like, Jordan, this really isn't going the way I wanted it to. Here's what I really want. Can we get back to that? That one skill used over and over. I've had people use this skill in one conversation 20 and 30 times in one conversation, because people doubted their motive. But when everything started to get emotional again, they'd stop and say, you know what? This isn't going the way I wanted to. Let's get back to my best motive, my best intent. That's what we want to start our conversation with. And anytime it starts to go off the rails, stop and go back. Take that deep breath, ask yourself a question, and then voice your best intent as you do it. When you do that, what happens is you take emotional responsibility. Take responsibility for your emotions. You actually begin to take back charge. And then you begin to look for the why of both parties. As you do this, your brain starts asking questions even more. And then what happens, you start to see what you can and what you can't control. If I can't control it, I can't do anything about it. If I can do something. And as I talk through all this today, I think I've been talking for 28 minutes now. What does all this matter? Well, I'm going to share a story why I wrote the book, why I do the work I do. When I started teaching Crucial Conversations, I started teaching it, and I took the class and I thought, this is an amazing class. And I went out and started using it, practicing it, and saw a real difference in my life. And so I went to the authors. They hadn't even written the book at that time. I went to the authors of Crucial Conversations and asked them, hey, could I teach could I sell your training and teach it? They allowed me to come in as an associate many years ago in about 2001. And I actually went out and started training it. As I trained it, I thought, how can I be the leader that practices what they teach? I wanted to be the person that could stand in front of a classroom and say, I've done this work. So I had this crazy idea to go clean up all my past relationships. Now, when I say clean up a past relationship, I think of someone you see walking down the hall and you don't want to talk to that person. So there's another way to your office. You take that exit way and you go to your office the different way. That's a relationship I needed to clean up. I wanted to make sure I could face anyone on this planet and have a comfortable feeling that I know I did my best with. I had a list of 36 people, and it took me nearly 2.5 years. So when I first started doing this, I called my mom up and I said, hey, Mom, I'm I'm going to go clean up all my past relationships. She started laughing. She goes, what do you mean by that? I said, well, and I told her what I just told you. She started laughing. She said, well, son, I want to hear the stories. So I'd go have a couple of conversations, come back in a week, call her, say, hey, I had 3 this week. Here's how it went. We started laughing. We talk about it, or she was just my biggest cheerleader. And there were times in there where I hadn't talked to anyone in a while. My mom would call me up and she'd say, hey, Greg, you still working on a list or did you quit? I said, Mom, I'm still working. I just haven't run into anyone. So fast forward 2.5 years later, I'm on my next to my last conversation. I said, Mom, I'm on my next to my last conversation. It's with my boss tomorrow in Houston, Texas. And she said, call me as soon as you're done, because she knew the situation with me and my boss. So I went, I had the conversation. It was one that was one and done. And he was a real hard person to work for, but the conversation went so well. I came out to the parking lot and called my mom on my cell phone. I said, Mom, it went great. Here's how it went. She said, oh, that's great. She goes, who's your last conversation with? I said, it's Dad. And she said, oh, no, you don't. Now, she's been my confidant. She's been my cheerleader. She's been my support for 2.5 years on all these conversations. She's never said no. But with my dad, she knew it wasn't going to go well. And I did too, because I knew how my dad was. Let me give you a little background on my father. And also my parents had the best marriage I've ever seen. They were a real team. And so early on, this was my family. And then my parents got together, and they were the best marriage I've ever seen. They were supportive of each other. They had each other's back. And then when I was very young, my dad went off to Vietnam. And he came back when I was 5 years old, a very different man than when I left when he was 4. And about a year after my dad came back, my dad switched roles. He became an old-time Southern Baptist, hellfire and brimstone, walking up and down the aisle preacher. Now, this is why my mom told me, she said, son, if you have your conversation with your dad, I'll never see you again. And she knew, based on how strict my father was, and my dad actually was a pastor at many churches, most of them in deep East Texas and very small towns. This is one that was actually formed in 1862 and out of Nacogdoches. And this was another one that was out in West Texas and Big Spring. And my dad was hellfire and brimstone. And kind of give you a little idea how it was. My dad was the type that burned books and records. When we were in Nacogdoches, my dad would travel there, where the nearest grocery store was 20 miles away, and he would go to the library and actually check out books and records and burn them on the steps of the Nacogdoches Public Library. That's who my dad was. When I decided to go to college, my dad was so upset because I decided to go to Baylor University. Now, Baylor is a Baptist college, and you would think he should be happy about that. But my dad felt Baylor was too wild. To add a little more sauce to it, my junior year at Baylor, my dad called me and said, son, you need to come home this week. And they were living in East Texas again. So what do you mean I need to come home? It's the middle of the semester. I'm not coming home. He said, well, we're meeting with a lawyer Saturday and we need you here. Why are you meeting with a lawyer, Dad? We're disowning your sister. Whoa, back up. What did Wendy do? And Dad said, well, we found out she's dating a guy who has a terrible reputation, and it looks like it's going to the next level. And we found out he's drinking beer and alcohol, and we can't have that in the family. Well, at Baylor, I'd become quite the partier. So I wasn't going to talk about my alcohol consumption, but I felt like I owed it to my sister to actually make the trip down to East Texas and try to talk him out of it. Fortunately, I did. But how safe do you think it would be for my dad, for me to talk to my dad about my real life? It wouldn't, but I'll be honest with you, I was never going to do that in the first place. To be honest with you, I didn't like my dad. We weren't close. I didn't like how strict it was. But I was on my own at 17. I went out. And then after this, I really didn't talk to my dad. I stayed away from him. Then back to the conversation with my mom. I said, Mom, you know I have to have the conversation with Dad. And she got real quiet on the phone. She said, son, if it helps, let your dad know I've known the entire time. I said, Mom, I'm not going to throw you under the bus. She said, son, if it keeps you in my life, let him know. I said, well, give him the phone. He got on the phone, and I never talked to him on the phone. He said, hello. I said, hey, it's your son. He said, hey. I said, hey, Dad, I bought a home in Austin and sold it. And you never even saw it. I'm in my new house. I said, why don't you come and let's spend a week together and get to know each other again? He lit up like a Christmas tree. He said, I'll be there. A couple weeks later, car comes in. My roommate had left for the entire week. I come out and my stomach just starts turning. I know I've got to have this conversation with him. And I'm shaking because the adrenaline's so much. And we don't know what to talk about. He comes in the house. He's looking around. He goes up the attic. I go in the living room and I'm just sitting there going, this was a terrible idea. I shouldn't have done this. So he comes down out of the attic. He's walking towards me, looking at me, and he takes a left and goes into the kitchen. And then it hits me. I forgot to get something out of the refrigerator before he came that day. All of a sudden, I heard the refrigerator door open, and I hear this scream. Whose beer is this in here? You shouldn't have a roommate that drinks. And in that moment, I'd been preparing for 2 years. All of it went out the window. I nearly blamed it on my roommate. But before I could get the first words out of my mouth, my dad said, you don't let alcohol pass the plane of your front door. I'll stick around an extra day, and when he gets here, we'll kick him out together. I said, Dad, calm down. He said, I'm not going to calm down. I said, Dad, that's my beer. I've been drinking since I was a sophomore at Baylor. Sit down. I need to tell you something. And I began to tell him everything I had ever done. Things you wouldn't tell the most liberal parent in the world, let alone the most conservative. And after about 15 minutes, my dad said, stop. But he was in tears. And he looked at me. He said, son, I know what you're doing. I will always love you. But I do not like you. I do not like the man you become. You're a hypocrite and a liar. And I don't care if I ever see your face again. And when he said that, something snapped in me. And I had a repressed memory about something I'd found out he had done his entire life that he preached against. And in that moment, I nearly said, I'm the hypocrite, you're the hypocrite. But something stopped me. And I asked that question. I took a breath. I asked that question, what is it I want? And all I could think of is I want to hurt him really bad right now. But I stuck with the question. I didn't speak. Stayed with it. What is it I really want? And in that moment, even preparing for it, I didn't realize this. I wanted a real relationship with my dad. I think every boy does. Even man as well. I wanted a real relationship with my dad. What am I pretending not to notice about my role? That's the next question that came. What did I do? And you know what? Dad was right. I was a hypocrite to him. Many times we'd be in someone's house and say, see the beer over there, the wine on the counter, acting like I didn't. Next question. Why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do what my dad just did? Well, from his perspective, he feels like a failure right now as my father and as my minister. Next question came to me was, what do I do right now? And I looked at him and I said, Dad, you're right. I'm a hypocrite to you. Mom knows what I do. Wendy, my sister, knows. All my friends know I love to party. I've lived my life out in the open, except with you. I wanted you to come here to talk to you about it. I can see you're ready to walk out the door. That's not what I want. I said, I would like you to stay at least 3 more days because you just got here. But if you stay those 3 days, we have to talk about everything we kept from each other. So if we never see each other again in this lifetime, at least we will know who we were to each other. And my dad looked at me, still crying. He said, son, I'll give you 3 days. then I never want to see your face again. I can't look at you right now. You make me sick. He turns around, walks out the door, and slams it. So how was that for a conversation? Didn't go the way I wanted. And I sat there for nearly 2 hours just shaking, not knowing what to do, knowing that I'd made a mistake. And he comes in, slams the door. Okay, let's do this talking thing. So that was my audience. But we sat down and we started to get into each other's lives, talking about the things we'd never been able to. And it was the first time I began to connect with my dad. I couldn't believe it. Went to bed. Next morning, we talked the entire day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, till midnight. Next day, went to bed, got up, talked the entire day. I can't tell you how close I felt to my father. Something I never expected to happen. I just wanted to be able to say, I've done all my conversations with people. This was impossible to me. I went to bed last night going, I know he's going to stay the rest of the week. I felt so good. And I came out the next morning of my room, and my dad's standing at the door, luggage in hand, and his whole attitude had reverted back to day one, and my heart sunk. My dad said, son, I told you I was ready to go. 3 days. I said, okay. I walked him out. He throws his luggage in the trunk, closes it, turns, looks me dead in the eye, says nothing, gets in his car, drives away, and he dies 3 years later. Now, why do I share that story today with you? Here's the thing. I need you to hear this. I'm not on the line for your conversations. You are. I was on the line for mine. And in that moment, I knew I did the right thing. I also know I did my best. But you can never control another person's reaction. I can't do that. But there was something that I felt complete with, that I had completed it. It didn't take the pain away. But I also found out that day you have no idea what can happen when you begin to respectfully speak your truth. Because that car stopped about halfway down the street. It sat there a second. It backs up, pulls in. My dad jumps out. He's crying again. He comes. He bear hugs me. He says, son, I love you and I like you. I like the man you become. He said, honestly, I wanted you to be a preacher. You like to party way too much for that. He said, I'll always be on you about the alcohol because you know it ruined my family. I said, Dad, you never even shared that about your father until this week. He said, can we start this relationship you're talking about? Now, 3 days ago was a conversation. Now it's a relationship. So what do you want? He said, come see me in 2 weeks. And I knew what he meant because when I went home and to Dallas, I'd normally just spend time with mom. I wouldn't spend any time with dad. So I said, Dad, I'll be there to see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, walked in the door. First thing he said, you're not still drinking beer, are you? Now people can push your buttons. I had no more buttons to push. I looked at him and I said, Dad, I gave him a hug. I said, I know how difficult your childhood was. If alcohol ever becomes a problem for me, would you be a rock and just help me? He said, yeah. Never brought it up again. About 6 months after my dad and I started this relationship, I asked my dad if I could use this story in my class. He said, what story? I said, it's our story, and here's how I'd like to tell it. I told it, and the first thing he said after I told it to him, he said, son, I'm not that way anymore. Now, remember what I told you earlier? And this is my father before he passed. Remember what I told you earlier? You have no ability to change another person. But if you change how you do things, others may have to change how they engage with you. That happened in my relationship with my father. And before he passed away, even though we didn't see eye to eye on nearly anything, he was one of my best friends before he passed. And so, folks, that's one of the reasons I do the work. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book. And I want to leave you with these two last things before we take questions. And it's this. Going back, everything in my life I create, promote, or allow. And the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Folks, you've got one life. Enjoy it. Live it to its fullest. Speak your truth respectfully, but please speak it. And I would like to open it up for questions that maybe people have. And any questions, Jordan?
Yeah, we had a couple general questions and then a couple real life scenarios that people are wanting to ask you about. So we'll start with kind of these broader scenarios here.
Okay.
So the first one is we have someone who they put in, your boss is not holding other leaders accountable, and you see a discrepancy of workload and follow ups. Tasks that should be completed by other leaders are not assigned to me as the middleman, and yet no accountability on the other leaders whose job it actually is.
Okay. Well, first, I would, the question becomes, how are decisions made? And are you holding yourself accountable to discuss these things with your boss? That's the hard thing. If you don't have the skills, I can understand why you might not. But if you do, you've got a real opportunity here. When you're able to say the thing that no one else can, but you do it respectfully and honestly, a whole different relationship can ensue. I find that over and over, but you have to be able to do it respectfully. So how do I do that? Well, do you know how your boss defines respect? Guess what? Everyone defines it differently. I would start there. I'd start with something like, hey, I'm reading a book, or I'm taking a class, or I'm trying to change how I communicate, and I'd like to talk about how we communicate. Don't start at the real issue. You've got to build up to it if you haven't done any of this. So part of it is, hey, one of the first things they said in this book is, let's talk about what respect looks like. I want to treat you respectfully, and I need to hear how you define it, not how I define it. That puts you on a different playing field immediately. And then you can share how you know when you're being respected. When I talk about this, it's not about the respect out there. It's about, how do I know I'm being respected? When I know what my boss says and I can share what I say, then we can go to other deeper conversations. What do you think about accountability? What do you want me to do if I see something differently than you? Could I bring it up? Or do you see that as me challenging your point of view? I never want to come across that way. That's a whole different conversation. But typically we battle on the things that we see the problem. We've got to go deeper. We've got to begin to talk about how we work together and the underlying agreements we have and the relationship we have. We've got to set that foundation, because otherwise you don't have those. You're going to be like all those other homes we saw around Sand Palace. We've got to have that foundation. That's the key. And it becomes from talking about what respect looks like, what kind of agreements we have. When you can do that, you can begin to talk about the other things.
Great.
Is that helpful, Jordan?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. So we have our next question here, and I apologize. I have some crazy echo going on. I don't know where that's coming from. We are having all kinds of technical issues today. So this next question is, how and if to address an employee's underperformance who is managed by a different manager?
So there a lot of questions come to that. Part of it is it your job to do that? It might not be, and it might. So let's say you are supporting that person. What I would do is bring the facts in. You don't start with, oh, you're not pulling your weight. You give the evidence of why they aren't. You got this, you're getting this reports in. You didn't do this job. You didn't do this job. When I see that, it seems like you're not pulling your weight, or you're not supporting the way you need to be. Do you see it differently, or have I missed something? You want to invite that person into the conversation as you do this. In my book, I have a chapter on how to put your message together. You'll want to lay out your best intent first. So it sounds something like, I want to talk to you about something that's difficult, but I'm doing this to help you and to help the organization and your reputation. That would be the good intent. Here's what I've seen. The last 3 instances, this happened, whatever the facts are, then say, it's coming across to me like you might not be pulling your weight. Help me understand your perspective. That's the structure. But to be able to do that, you have to come in from a place of, I care about that person and I care about their goals. If you can't do that, you're not prepared to have that conversation, because anything other than that, that person's going to feel manipulation. You're going to get resistance, and it's going to show up immediately. And you're going to wonder why. If that happens, what do? Stop, go, you know what? We didn't get off on the wrong foot. I apologize. This is what I want to do. Again, go back to your best intent. I want to solve this problem and help your reputation. I want to be able to do that. I got off on the wrong foot here. Just bring it back to your best intent.
Great. So our next question comes in. What are some effective strategies for handling team members who almost weaponize their tenure to resist collaboration or change?
Well, that's a broad question, because what are they specifically doing? I'd need to look at that, because one of the things we teach in the book is that many times we see something, we observe it, but you're giving me your opinion about what they're doing. I need that hard, concrete. What are the things that they're actually doing? So that's going to have to be part of the message. But part of that also is, do you have agreement about how the team's going to work? That's one reason teams, if you look at any sports organization that wins a national championship or the trophy at the end of the year, it's because it's a team. Doesn't mean team members don't fight. They have a common goal, they have common respect, and they deal with a lot of different things. As we do this, what are our boundaries? What are our ground rules? Do we have agreements, or are we making assumptions? That makes that conversation like quicksand. But all of a sudden, if we say as a team, this is what we're going to do, this is what respect looks like for the team, and we give each other carte blanche to hold us to this standard, you have a whole different team that can show up. But you've got to do the steps to put it in place. You just don't go in and walk in quicksand and think you're not going to sink. You've got to set that ground rule.
Great.
I don't know if I answered that question, because there's so many. It was a real broad one.
Well, we have one that's kind of similar.
Okay.
So this person comes in and asks, when someone in power repeatedly shuts down feedback with phrases like, we've tried that before, or that's not how we do things around here, how do you keep the dialogue productive?
Yeah. When you're talking to leaders like that, your leaders are just people as well. When I see something like that, I'm going to suggest that looks to me like a psychological safety issue. What happens, even with a leader, you're asking me to do something that's possibly failed before, or I don't know how to do it in an effective way. And then that challenges me as a leader. So there's several things on that regarding this. The first thing I want to do is stop everything and make sure that leader knows I'm not challenging them. All right? We have to show, here's the 2 keys to psychological safety. I'll give them to you, but it's hard to get to them sometimes. Your leader needs to know that you respect them, and you need to verbalize it as you do, and that you care about their goals. Okay? Mutual purpose and mutual respect. And so when I see a leader or anyone react, I use a skill where I say, I want you to know I'm not challenging your thought process. I'm not doing that. I have the same goals. I want to support you, and help me understand why. I'm not challenging you. I'm just trying to understand. When you start having curiosity, but what happens is when they react, you react. So they raise their voice. We're not going to do that. You shut down, and you're in what we call this downward spiral. And it's going to continue because you're behaving in the exact way that confirms their opinion about you, and and the vice versa. So many things are going on there, but it's just an issue of psychological safety. Has nothing to do with trying something new. Has to do with, do you respect me, and do you have my same goals in mind? When we get that person there, we can typically talk about almost anything. But that's the other thing. Everyone has an ego. And I have to engage with that. I have to show that ego, that person. I respect them as they identify with that. I'm not challenging them. I support them and I support their goals. Can we talk about this? That goes back to setting the agreements up front. Do you want me to challenge you? Or do you want me to question? Do you see my questions as a challenge? And the key here is don't become judgmental, get curious. Mm-hmm. If you can turn that curious brain on, it's going to help you so much, because that's when real listening happens. So they react, go, wow, I didn't know that didn't work before. Help me understand. Tell me what happened. I don't want to do something we haven't done before or that's failed. That's not what I want. Let's talk about what happened before. Are the circumstances the same? Are the players the same? Do we have more information? There's a lot of questions under that I can begin to ask if I'm curious. But if I'm not, if I'm judgmental, I stop asking and I shut it down.
All right. Well, I know we have about 3 minutes left. So we have one more question, and then Greg, I'll let you plug in where everybody can find you.
Okay.
So our last question is, what is the best way to give feedback to a senior leader who often uses humor or sarcasm to deflect accountability?
Yeah. And humor and sarcasm is a sign of that person not being psychologically safe. I'm going to go back to it again. You've got to show them that you care about them, respect them, and that you care about their goals. And so it may look like, and you don't want to do this in front of a group, by the way. Okay. You want to pull them aside and say, I'd like to talk to you about something. Last couple times I've seen this, and these are, when this was said, this is exactly what you said. It shifted everything and people stopped talking. Is that what you want during those meetings, or am I missing something? Just real straight and simple. If they get upset, again, I'm not challenging you. I'm just trying to understand. As you do this, you'll find your own rhythm to it. It's really a dance when you start to have, but you have to have the skill sets, and you have to understand what's going on, because there's so much going on in all of these conversations. You have to be able to turn on a dime. That's why the practice of these is so important.
Great. Well, Greg, where can everybody find you? What can they get in contact with you?
Well, if you can learn more about like our master teams, you can go to alignment-resources.com. That's where my information is. You can also find where to buy the book there if you want to. Also, if you want to schedule a meeting and just talk, I'm more than open to schedule a Zoom meeting with you, sit down and talk. Everything we always talk about will be just between you and me. And if you're interested in bringing me in for something, let me know. But that's what we're here to do. Our mission is to help people in relationships be able to speak their truth and build the relationship while they're doing it.
Great. Well, and with that, for those of you that are still on the call, you will be the first to know. We are very excited. We just signed Greg and Alignment Resources on as a new PCMA partner. So I'm sure you will all be hearing more from Greg soon. But Greg, thank you for today. This was awesome. So many great key takeaways here. You guys know where to find them if you want to schedule time or learn more about Alignment Resources. But that concludes today's webinar. So thank you everyone for joining. And again, Greg, thank you for the time today. Very valuable.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.